Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around. Hello, friends. Welcome back to MHM. We hope you had an amazing summer. And we're so excited to be back with you, with our friends, and with today's amazing special guest, Lindley Key.
Woo! Yay! So today, as your opener back, your first episode post break, we are talking about Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And I thought, who better to have on talking about Belle than Lindley Key, who is a New York-based actress, content creator, and award-winning cosplayer, who might be best known for her viral conversation with Brendan Fraser on TikTok.
Cool.
Yes, what did he say to you? Yes, something, ma'am.
Shucks, ma'am.
Shucks, ma'am.
I think that's still my Twitter name is Lindley Shucks, ma'am Key.
I love it. But I met Lindley online, and we've become dear friends thanks to the cosplay community. She taught herself how to sew during lockdown, and I am absolutely gobsmacked by her talent. One of her most notable handmade pieces is a crossover from Belle from Beauty and the Beast with Claire Fraser from Outlander, who she calls that cosplay Bonnie and the Beast, which is very creative. And and so that, combined with her musical theater background, are why I asked her to be our guest. Get it? Be our guest for the Belle episode of MHM.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much.
Anyway, so Lindley, we're going to put you on the spot right away with a brief synopsis of Beauty and the Beast.
All right. So the brief synopsis that I can come up with for Beauty and the Beast is Beauty and the Beast tells the story of Belle. She lives in a very small town with her father and is sort of an outcast because no one really gets her. No one's like her. Her father goes off and ends up in the clutches of a terrible beast in an enchanted castle. And she offers herself. She's like, let me take his place. The beast says yes, and she discovers this enchanted castle full of talking objects and a beast who is a prince in disguise. But that prince in disguise has to learn to love and be loved by somebody else in order to break his curse. Hijinks and musical numbers ensue, romance, a very buff villain with a fantastic musical number happens.
Yes.
And that, without spoiling, that's Beauty and the Beast.
All right. Without spoiling, everyone. Just
without
so you know,
spoiling a movie that came out in 1991.
There will be spoilers in this episode in case you were.
Pause now. Go watch the movie if you haven't already, and then come back. And for people who aren't watching on YouTube, I just have to throw in that we have some dress up cosplaying going on. Lindley's wearing her beautiful Belle costume. I'm wearing like a cheap one I got off Amazon from
but it's still so pretty.
Thank you. I really love the bow. That's my favorite part.
I love
I
a
actually
bow
didn't
moment. I got it's hard to see with my headphones.
You're both
I wore this
cute.
costume. Thank you. I wore this costume as part of a couple's costume with my boyfriend, and he was a taco, and we were Taco Bell. So.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. That is peak couples costume.
Yes.
And Lindley, yours is handmade, correct?
Yes, yours is handmade though.
Technically, the blouse is from Target, but the vest, I'm not wearing like the petticoat and the bottoms right now, but this is handmade. It was part of a sew along with our Shield Maiden. I was like, you know what? I'll just turn this into Belle. And here we are.
It's amazing. Wow.
So good.
Wow. I'm so impressed. I wish I could sew, but I don't know how. Anyway, thank you for that beautiful synopsis. Again, if you haven't seen it, go watch it because while the synopsis was spoiler free, we will be talking spoilers today.
Yeah. Which if you haven't seen Beauty and the Beast yet, what are you doing with your life?
Who are
you? Gotta
you?
get on that.
What the heck? the animation, I will say, when I rewatched it for the first time in a very, very long time, I was kind of blown away by the animation. I don't
It's
remember it
stunning.
being, it's stunning. I don't remember it being so beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really,
Yeah.
I
really good.
mean,
I
the
felt the
just
same
like
way.
the colors and just the artistry of it. I mean, there's a reason why it was the first animated movie to be nominated, not just for Best Animated Feature, but for Best Movie, Best Film at the
Mm.
Oscars. Like, it
Oh,
was
Mhm.
the first to ever do that.
wow.
Wow. Yeah. That is amazing. That
Yeah.
makes sense. It's really good. So, like you both said, this movie came out in 1991. I did not see it in theaters. I don't remember the first time I saw it, but Lindley, what about you? Do you remember the first time you saw the movie?
I don't exactly remember the first time I saw it because it came out just a couple months before I was born.
Yeah.
So I believe it came out in the summer of 1991. I was born in October of 1991, but we had the VHS growing up, and I just attached myself to this movie and to
Mm.
Belle ever since I was very little. The two movies, I think I told Heather this, the two movies that would like calm me down if I was upset as like a little kid were Beauty and the Beast and Beetlejuice. And that is all you need to know about my personality.
I love it.
That's amazing.
So it was just always a part of my life, and I've always loved it.
Aw.
Yeah,
HB, what
that's
about
really
you?
sweet. That's really sweet. I don't remember the first time I saw it either. I being the eldest here, I was like 2 when it came out, or like 1 or 2, but um I like, again, like, it was just heavily in the rotation as a child, like all the time, loved it. I do think it's like one of the more, speaking, like, since we've recently done some of the older films, like, I think it's one of the more entertaining. Like, there's a lot that happens, although it is still very dark. Like, there's a lot of dark in it as well, which I was like, just Disney just keeps doing it. I like to we like to pretend that Disney is like sunshine and rainbows, but it's pretty heavy and dark like most of the time. So I don't know why
Yeah.
that's like, though, that's like an association is like, oh, Disney, let's paint everything happy. It's like, no, we talk like Disney is pure like trauma, and then watching a character get through it. Like, that's basically what Disney is.
You're not wrong at all.
No, that's a really good point. And especially I think with this movie, I didn't note, obviously, because I never watched this through the lens through which we are watching these movies, but I definitely noticed a theme of like post trauma and like how like hardships and traumatic events can shape a person. Like I feel like Belle, and we'll get into this later, but I think Belle turned into like a very sweet, nurturing person after her mother passed. But you know, Beast was like very hard and cruel, and I think there was a lot of shame and anger, and then I don't know what happened in Gaston's life, but he's just a piece of shit anyway. I do remember though, while I don't remember the first time I watched the animated movie, I do remember seeing the live action in theaters, and I loved it. I really, really liked it. I like that it addressed kind of all the plot holes people or issues people had with the animated movie, like the library, like why is there, or the bookstore, why is there a giant bookstore when she's the only person that reads? So they turned into this like section of books in the church or whatever.
I think that when it comes to like personal experiences with this movie, like, I don't know that I am a Belle. Like, I don't I think that like a part of me wanted to identify as a Belle, but I, in terms of like Disney princess, right? Again, she was one of the Disney princesses who had like dark hair. So I think for me, I was like, should I associate with this princess because I could maybe kind of look like her. But I think something about her that I couldn't really relate to, like something that I did relate to, was like how people perceived her as odd. Because I was also perceived as odd. So like that's what I related to. But I never understood why she was perceived as odd, because she seemed so smart and beautiful to me that I was like, are people just like it didn't make sense to me. Like this, when I was younger, it just like, it didn't compute. I was like, but like, all the cool people look like Belle, so like I don't get it, you know? Like it just like didn't. And not to say that like looks equate to anything, but I will say that like young me didn't understand why she was an outcast, and I understood why I was an outcast. And it was like, okay, I get it. She like likes to read, but like the most like the most beloved, like sought after man in town is in love with her. So like how does that make her the weird one, you know? So that's like one of my like, I don't know where Belle fits for me in like in terms of like my favorite princesses that I could relate to, because I feel like I had a like confusing relationship with her growing up. It's like I wanted to relate to her and I loved her, but I also didn't understand why everyone else treated her the way that they did. So yeah.
See, for similar reasons, that's why I attached myself to Belle as a kid, because I grew up in a very small town, very small North Carolina town, and I grew up in a place where I didn't feel like I belonged. And I remember I was always a nerd growing up, and it wasn't cool to be nerdy back in the day. And I remember when Star Wars The Phantom Menace came out, I was hyper fixating on that movie so much, and I brought this like cool little behind the scenes making book, and I loved it so much, and I was showing it around, and it ended up being taken and buried in the playground.
What?
So I attached myself to Belle not only, you know, as a kid, I'm like, oh, she has brown hair. I have brown hair too. That's what it started as. But as I got a little older and felt more and more of an outcast and wanting to leave and find a place where I felt like I belonged, I wanted that adventure in the great wide somewhere. For me, that is why I attached myself to Belle so much, was that feeling of being an outcast and not feeling like I belonged.
That makes a lot of sense. And also that's really heartbreaking that that happened to you. People are so mean.
I like felt that in my gut. I was like,
like
oh my gosh, how mean.
Kids can be mean. Kids to other kids can be mean.
Kids are scary. They are. They're really scary. And I think to both of your points, I think maybe that's something a lot of other people might relate to. I feel like I related to this in some way too, is like being an outcast, but not really knowing why either. You know, like, yeah, she was a little nerdy and she read books, and I guess that wasn't like the cool thing to do in town or something. But again, like that was like her only thing. Why does that make her the weird one? And I think there are a lot of people who are like, I just really like this thing and I don't understand why people think it's weird, but that's fine. And the only thing I can say to that is just like, you do you. If it makes you happy and doesn't hurt anybody, keep doing you.
Yeah, don't bury other children's books in a playground, because that's cruel. So if that's what makes you happy, you're a bad person.
Yeah, no. Don't do that. That is weird, and that's not
do
cool.
that. Just let people like what they like.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about our favorite things about Belle. I have like a long list, and I'm sure that Lindley does too. Well, we probably all do. Yeah.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
Okay, so I like that she's bookish. We get a bookish Disney princess. I think that's fun.
That would definitely be on Book Talk.
Yes,
she would definitely.
Absolutely, she would be the queen of Book Talk.
Smash that follow button.
She'd be like, yeah, she'd like be holding the phone and like carting across on that like ladder that rolls across the thing and be like, you know,
dream.
I can picture it now. I was listening to the
There's
lyrics.
a cosplay idea. Sorry, Lindley.
Oh.
There you go.
Someone get me a ladder. It's gonna
just a
happen.
Ladder. No,
just
even
a ladder.
Just a ladder.
I will glue wheels to it. We'll make it work.
Slide it across.
Oh,
let's go. So I was listening to the lyrics of the song that introduces her. What is it called, Lindley? The song.
Belle.
It's just called Belle. Okay.
Like the beauty but a funny girl. Yeah, it's just called Belle.
Okay, great. And so like the ways that other people describe her are funny girl, peculiar, and that's why I put in quotes. I was like, but she isn't really peculiar, but whatever. And what else? So she's a beauty, but a funny girl. There you go. Strange but special, whatever that means. um so she stands up for what, I think it's cute that she stands up for her father. He's not crazy, he's a genius, right? Like, you know, she's supportive, she's courageous, she sacrifices herself for her father, she's brave, which is something that Mrs. Potts says to her at some point. She's charming, she charms Cogsworth and eventually charms the prince, the beast, the prince, whatever. She's a fighter, she fights the wolves. And she's very kind but also very playful, which I think this is like a list that makes me think like a well-rounded human being, you know what I mean? Like not just like a facade of like an ideal, right? Like she's kind, she's playful, she's brave, she's charming, she's sassy, she's got humor, like she's got a lot to her that I think
she's
is
a
really
very like
endearing.
multi-dimensional character that I feel like we haven't seen, especially since most recently we've talked about like Snow White. And have we talked about Sleeping Beauty yet?
Not yet. We haven't talked about her yet.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway, just like the older generation of princesses and heroines that were very much like, I'm pretty and I sing well and that's my thing. But we've got Belle, and she was like, I read, I cook, I clean, I stand up for myself, and I'm a kind, compassionate, caring person.
I think we started to get that with Ariel, where she wasn't just a one-dimensional, be like, oh, I'm a pretty princess. And not saying that those other princesses aren't one-dimensional, but you have with Ariel, you started to see more of like, oh, she's very curious, she's also very brave and going and seeking what she wants. So I always like to think that Ariel walked so that Belle could run. Just
Ariel
that
walked.
progression. Yeah, she walked. She did end up walking. She swam so that Belle could run, because we really see that progression of making a princess more than just pretty faces and pretty ball gowns. Like, she is in of herself a fully fledged character.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have anything to add to the list?
Yes. So it's kind of going off one of the things that you were saying. Belle is a very kind and compassionate person, but she is not afraid to stand up for herself. One of my favorite examples is after the wolf attack, when her and the beast, like, she's caring for him, but she's also not backing down, be like, okay, I ran away because you were being a jerk. And like their little tiff back and forth of her not cowering away, of her standing her ground and to her beliefs and being like, look, this is why I did what I did. I'm not sorry for it. And I'm going to make you realize my opinion. But also, I'm going to take care of you and thank you for, saving my life. So that's that beautiful portrait of her character, of her kindness and her strength, just in one scene. And I love it.
Yeah. I made a note of that one too, because I was like, I loved how she was like, well, you shouldn't have done that. And he was like, well, you shouldn't have done this. And she's like, well, you shouldn't have yelled at me. And he was like, okay, I concede. That's a good point. But also, you shouldn't have been in the West Wing. And she's like, whatever. Anyway, I made a note of that too, because he's like yelling at her. And anytime anyone raises their voice at me, I like cry. So I do love how strong she was in that moment. And I do think it is a representation of how like rebellious she is in some kind of way. I think like her character is definitely breaking out of those gender norms or whatever, like especially when Gaston comes and is trying to woo her, and he's like, you're gonna be my pretty little wife and we're gonna have 8, or I don't know how many kids, but we're gonna have kids and dogs and you're gonna cook and massage my feet. And she's like, absolutely fucking not, no thank you.
Can we talk about how iconic when she's looking through the little door viewfinder and Gaston shows up, the look of disgust in Belle's face is iconic. Absolutely iconic.
It's so good. Oh, it's so good.
Truly.
And that's so real too, because usually when you think of princess, you're just like, oh, okay, I'm going to deal with this. But Belle's like, oh gosh, no, not him.
Yes.
I don't have time for him right now. Let's keep it going.
Yeah. I do love how expressive she is and how she's not like polite and demure and like whatever. She's very much just not a typical Disney heroine or princess. And I think that's what I also really like about her. Very similarly to HB. I love her love of books. As for those not watching on YouTube, I have my bookshelves behind me, and that's not even all of them. And I think that's the main thing I related to was like, if books are what made her weird, then like I was weird and I loved it. I loved reading. I still do. Like it, and I love that we have that representation in a Disney princess and someone so cool. I will say though, not my only, but one of my irks is I'm really tired of the trope of an effortlessly beautiful girl who is oblivious to her own beauty. But I do think it is more of a commentary on her beautiful heart and personality. And yet, I'm really tired of the whole like, oh, she's so beautiful, but she doesn't see it. But whatever. Anyway, side note.
I could see that argument, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But I do
behind you.
love her. I love her. I really like this movie. I can't wait to get, and I don't know if we want to talk about it now, but the whole discussion about Stockholm syndrome is something that
Wait,
I feel
let's talk about something else first. We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. I do think we should get there. But first, I have a question about the timeline that I need y'all to help me hammer out before we get into like themes and all that kind of stuff. Like, I am very confused, and my notes are very like intermittent, like shorthand. So I don't even remember what I meant sometimes when I'm writing. But in the spell, which maybe Lindley, I don't know, but like in the spell, it says something about like the rose will run out by his 21st year. So like, is that the 21st, like he's turning, the beast is turning 21, the prince is turning 21?
I think in the 1991 version, I think it, because there's a whole lore about this.
Okay.
I think in the animated Disney canon, it is his 21st birthday. Because if you go back and watch Beauty and the Beast, The Enchanted Christmas, you get flashbacks to when the curse was put upon him. And he was pretty young. Like, he wasn't an adult. So there's a whole argument about how wrong it was that, like, oh, he's just a kid. He had time to learn. Like, why did you curse a kid? And I know they tried to remedy that in the live action version to where like there's not a strict timeline of when all the petals were going to fall. They just say until the last petal falls. They don't say like it's going to fall on his 21st birthday. But as far as the animated canon, I think it is by the time the prince or the beast turns 21.
Okay, because then my other question is, in the song Be Our Guest, I think Lumiere says that they've been 10 years in these like,
oh yeah, he says 10 years we've been rusting, doing so much more than dusting. Yeah.
So I'm like, was the beast 10? Like,
that is what is implied.
Because in the stained glass at the beginning of the movie, when they're talking about the curse, the beast
looks like an adult.
as an adult. Yeah.
So like I thought he was 18 or something.
Yeah.
Like
it's very confusing to me. So I think that's messy. Messy job, Disney. Messy job. But there's people out there who I guess like make it make sense.
Yeah, I'm on the
magic.
camp of like it's fantasy, just go with it.
Yeah.
It's magic.
Yeah, it's magic.
Disney magic.
Or if we want to get super deep into it, it's a representation or a commentary on how bad things happen to children and they aren't given the opportunity to learn, and then they have to go on this journey as an adult to learn the things that they could have learned as a child had they been given a quote unquote healthy, functional, normal childhood.
Again, for the people in the back.
There you go.
LB is so very good at
whichever camp you want to be in, whether it's he was 10 and a bad thing happened to him, or he's older and we're just going to kind of ignore the animated lore, whichever one you can take take that.
And I kind of like the idea of like maybe time is, we got some Doctor Who wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff going on.
Yeah.
Maybe, the part of the enchantment was that the years kind of stretched a little bit for those in the castle. Maybe not so much in the village, or, you could be like in the live action version where time just kind of froze for
Mhm.
not only the people in the castle, but also the people like in the village who just completely forgot about everyone in the castle. So I think it's open to interpretation.
Yeah. Whatever you want to believe about the timeline. Yes.
It is correct.
Get the TVA on this. We gotta figure it out.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for helping with that, because I was like, when you're a kid, you don't listen to that. But like, obviously we were listening to it as adults, and I was like, this doesn't math. Math is not mathing.
I need that clip as like
Yep.
I need that clip, that sound on like everything when I can't figure something out. The math isn't mathing.
Please.
I love it.
With a little dance.
The little dance too.
But yeah, with that, let's dive head first. Stockholm syndrome.
Oh, that was so funny. Lindley, it seems like what I'm hearing is you have some thoughts and feelings about that.
I have thoughts.
Let's go. Let's
Wait,
go.
should we define Stockholm syndrome for anyone listening who doesn't know? I mean, I'm sure that everybody does, right?
Mhm.
But I don't know the clinical definition. My definition is like someone who has been held captive, falling in love with their captor.
Yeah.
That's my version.
And I think now there's even debates about how Stockholm syndrome isn't really a thing. Like it was just like they came up with it to explain something, but there are now debates on whether or not Stockholm syndrome is actually, a viable thing. As for the case of Beauty and the Beast, it's not. It's not Stockholm syndrome, guys.
That's what I agree. I was rewatching it and I was like, I can see how at a first glance, like if you just took the plot points of the thing, like
Yeah.
she gets captured, they fall in love. Yes, I can see how that would be like, maybe. But if you actually watch the thing, there are so many moments where like you just see them forming a connection, and he's not like, because so Google says Stockholm syndrome is a coping mechanism to a captive or abusive situation. People develop positive feelings toward their captors or abusers over time. This condition applies to situations including child abuse, coach athlete abuse, relationships abuse, and sex trafficking. But I feel like we don't, like, yes, Beast has a lot of anger and he has a lot of rage and he does like yell at her a lot, but he's not like outrightly abusing her. You know what I mean? I just think he's reacting with his temper. But there are so many moments where they have a connection, they really get to know each other, and they genuinely like care for each other's well-being. I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And it wasn't ever, because I didn't know about how the Stockholm syndrome maybe not being a thing anymore, but I know that there is a survival response called feigning. We have fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and feign. And I think maybe that's where Stockholm syndrome is now being boiled down into, is like feign or fawning, where in order to survive in abusive situations or get out of it, you fawn and you like feign to survive. I feel like I said that same phrase so many times in that sentence, but that's okay. Anyway, yes, continue. Why do you not think it's not Stockholm syndrome?
For me, it comes down to Belle, and I encourage people. Lindsay Ellis has a wonderful video essay about this exact topic on YouTube. Go watch it. She's amazing. It's such a great video.
We'll link it.
Yes. So for me, it comes down to Belle, and we talked about her little squabble with the Beast in that one scene, and how she's like, she gets her opinion so she fights back. But then when she is given the opportunity to leave, she leaves. Like when Beast is like, you're free, you can go. She's like, okay, yes, I'm going to go because my father is in danger. Thank you. Peace out. So the fact that she still has that agency to leave is for me, is a big sign of it not being a Stockholm syndrome case. Yes, she goes back to help the beast, but it's not a, oh, I feel guilty about leaving my captor. It's
Right.
like, hey, I've seen this change in him and he's become someone, not like, I'm not necessarily like I love him, but he's done this kindness to me. I have seen such a huge change in him and he's in trouble and I want to help him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for me that's a big, like, that's why I
Yeah.
don't think it's Stockholm syndrome.
It just
That's a
highlights her kind and nurturing nature. I
yes.
think if they hadn't gotten married by the end, there wouldn't have been that discussion or like,
Mhm.
but I feel like this is the same critique I had about Princess and the Frog. I wish it didn't end with them getting married and like being so deep in love. I wish it were just like he learned how to care for someone other than himself and also to accept love. Kind of like kind of like that scene from Schitt's Creek when Ted and I don't know if you guys have seen that show. I love it. But when Ted and Alexis first start dating and she like goes over to his house and he has the dogs there and she's like ew, and so at breakfast the next day he like gives her a book and it's like how to care for something other than yourself, but it was like a dog training book or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
And so I kind of feel like I would have, if I could rewrite Beauty and the Beast, I think I would have gone more in that direction where it was less of like he needs to fall in, like kind of like Little Mermaid where they have to like fall in love and kiss and within 3 days. I kind of wish it were more just like I want him to learn how to care for something other than himself, but also accept love that he is constantly freezing out because the furniture and the people who were turned into things in his castle genuinely care about him and want to
Yeah.
help him and want to take care of him, but he's just so full of anger and rage at what, his own, I
The
don't know, like,
situation. Yeah.
yeah, his own situation that he can't. And it is really heartbreaking. And it is definitely something a lot of people may go through or experience when they go through trauma or some kind of hardship is like they can't see past outside of their own like little bubble and they can't
Yeah.
see how their actions are affecting the people who care most about them,
Yeah.
and they react out of anger or rage or whatever. So I thought that was like a really interesting commentary or like representation because I don't think that's something that gets talked a lot about. Like I think
Yeah.
especially in our podcast and especially on social media, we hear so much about like positive post traumatic growth, but we don't really see or talk a lot about like the quote unquote bad stuff. Not that I think it's
Mhm.
necessarily bad. I think we all have our own journeys and we get to whatever points we get to. But I feel like we don't necessarily always talk about that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the stigma is like, oh, he's angry and he has a temper. He is not dealing with his stuff appropriately. And maybe it's just that he wasn't given the opportunity to express himself any other way?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
huge digression.
Yeah. The live action goes into how the beast wasn't raised in a very nurturing
Yes.
environment. Like
Mhm.
he had a mother who was very nurturing, but when she died, the king was very like cruel and hard and raised his son to be the same.
Yeah,
So when the beast became an adult, it's no surprise that he acted and treated people the same way his father did, probably because he was seeking that approval,
Yeah.
or wanting, seeing that this was how kings should be and kings should act, and if he was going to be a king or a ruler, this is how you should be. um
definitely.
which is not healthy at all, but he didn't have that kind of system to tell him that. Is, I think the Mrs. Potts goes into how, like, yeah, we were kind of complicit in it because we didn't say anything. We didn't try to help or say like, hey, maybe be nice, or
Yeah.
maybe your father
Yeah.
isn't right. And
Yeah.
it's hard to, in that situation, it's sad that they blame themselves for that, but also thinking of their situations, like they're not royalty. This is their job, and they might be scared of,
Yeah, it's like not really
speaking
their
out to the
place to
king.
say something. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like you can't, it's hard to put blame on someone for what is happening, but what we can do is just learn and grow
Yeah.
on all sides.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think speaking to the case of it not being Stockholm syndrome is also that like you see like those moments of growth and love between the two of them.
Mhm.
It's not just like her falling in love with him. You see them both bend. And I think the moments where she falls in love with him are the moments in which she sees him softening.
Yes.
Um, and I think that's also pretty important too, is like the soft, vulnerable moments are the moments when people will really get like those, that's when they get to see you,
Yeah.
And so I thought that was like really kind of beautiful as
Yeah.
well. And I think it also leads into a theme of shame that the beast like has about his appearance.
Mhm.
He's got a lot of shame about what he looks like, and I know that he is a beast, but I think a lot of people, I think it's something that you can relate to. Like I think it's something
Yeah.
that people can relate to, is like having shame about the way that they look, and that no one will ever love them because they have XYZ thing that is quote unquote wrong with them.
That
Um,
is so real.
yeah. And I think like holding on to that shame is not doing anyone any favors. Because the more we're able to release that shame and acknowledge like, sure, I don't look like a Disney prince, right? Or a Disney princess, but that doesn't mean that I am not worthy of love, or that doesn't mean that I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And I think that can like tie into obviously like body image and identity and all of that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
something I am so guilty of. I mean, thinking back of the scene where Beast is talking about this, it's like she's so beautiful, and just look at me.
Yeah.
I'm a single girl in New York. I'm on the apps. It's exhausting. But there are times where I have to stop myself, be like, I might like someone's profile or like someone's picture, but I won't pursue it because I'm like, okay, look at them. They're not going to be interested in someone like me. Like I'm
I do
so
the
guilty
same
of that.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
do the same thing.
it's a hard
Yeah.
brain space to get out of.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it obviously shame is a huge topic on a healing journey as well. Because I think Beast has a lot of unaddressed shame in that he thinks he is the bad thing. Like
Mhm.
there's a difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is when you're able to say, like, oh, I did a bad thing. But shame is saying, oh, I am the bad thing. And so I think his guilt, maybe in cursing himself and in cursing his castle, either didn't even turn into shame and maybe started out right away as shame, considering, especially in the live action, like the kind of parenting he had growing up.
Yeah.
And I think that a shift can happen when we're able to take the quote unquote bad thing and separate it from our identity. And it's not, I am the bad thing. It's like, this bad thing has happened, and trying to separate those like personalizations. And I mean, that's not to say you shouldn't take accountability when you do a bad thing, because Beast
Mhm.
obviously did not. But being able to say, like, this bad thing has happened, or I even did this bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily make me a bad person because I have the capacity, resources, capability to change it, to fix it, to take accountability and apologize and
Mhm.
remedy the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, shame, like what you said, Lindley, shame is just in general, just a really hard headspace to get out of, especially when not only the internal voice is telling you you are the bad thing, but external things may be telling you also you are a bad thing, whether that be
Yep.
society, parents, environment, social
Yeah.
media, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And it's
Yeah.
Dating
really hard.
apps.
dating
dating
apps.
apps
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
in media too, when media is telling you like you have to look a certain way and be a certain person in order to be loved, in order to have a
Yeah.
fairy tale romance, and you look at yourself and be like, I'm not that. Does that mean that I'm not worthy
Yeah.
of that sort of love and that sort of fairy tale? It's
Yeah.
hard.
And that reminds me of something you said earlier about the shoulds. You know, Beast has a lot of like a king should be this way, a prince should be this or look this way, act this way, right? Like in the live action, he's like taxing his village so that he can have all the ornate and beautiful, extraordinary things.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of like the remedy or I don't want to say solution, but I can't think of a word right now. To shame is just like rewriting and flipping the script on the shoulds. I think Beast shows a lot of like the shoulds, and I think Gaston does too, especially with the whole like I'm a big macho man and I'm a hunter and look at
Mhm.
how amazing I am and my capability to kill things and
Yeah.
provide for my possibly future wife or whatever. But like, and his obsession with Belle, I think, is like the biggest should that like
Yeah.
I'm this amazing egotistical maniac who has to have the best of the best in everything. And because Belle is apparently the most beautiful woman in the village, I have to have her. And it's
Yeah.
disgusting and gross and I don't love it. But
Yeah.
I
And
do
him
think it
thinking
is
that because of that, like you,
she
like
should
I should
also.
have you,
Yeah,
but you should also want me,
Yeah.
which is
exactly.
Yeah.
bleh,
Yeah.
bleh,
Yeah.
gross. Bleh.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that I think the shoulds can kind of um taint and blur and just like make things really confusing and muddy. And I think being able to take stock of like the shoulds we have in our life that were either conditioned or because we don't like we're not born with these shoulds, right? Like children don't have these ideas of what life should or shouldn't be. Like they just kind of take it as it comes. And
Yeah.
I think we can learn a lot from children in that way, even though they are very scary. But I think we, as we have gotten older, we hear a lot of shoulds that we have internalized. And I think it's important to take stock of those things and how they are currently affecting the compass of our life and seeing which ones we like, either which ones we like, or even like what empowering things we can take from the things we've learned, and then like
Mhm.
maybe put in the back seat or in our back pocket the not so great parts about those things.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
my note on shoulds.
Brilliant.
I have one more thing that ties back to the whole Stockholm syndrome thing. And it
Yeah.
goes back to kind of what we're talking about, how we're talking about the differences between the live action and the original animated version of Beauty and the Beast. One thing about the original Stockholm syndrome case was the one of the things that happened was the people that were taken captive refused to testify against their captor because I
Mm.
feel like they were pressured, like they would know what would happen if they did testify. Something that I think is a major difference and a major change that I'm not quite a fan of from the animated to the live action version is that in the animated version, Belle doesn't know what's going to happen when the last petal falls. She knows that the rose has some importance,
Mm.
but in the live action version, she is told like, "Hey, if the beast doesn't find anybody to love him, we're all screwed." So it's
Yeah.
like this added pressure on Belle be like, if I don't fall in love with this guy, am I going to be implicit to like whatever is going to happen
Yeah.
to these people? But in
Yeah.
the animated version, it's so much stronger because it allows the relationship between the beast and Belle to be so much more organic, to not
Mm.
have that pressure of what when the last petal falls, something bad is going to happen. Like these people who were people are going to be objects and like a monster until kingdom come. But
Yeah.
I just feel like that is also a strong argument as to why this isn't Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, I think from what we've talked about today, what Stockholm syndrome is and kind of looks like, it just seems like there's a lot of fear. Like it's
Hmm.
not so much love so much as it is like fear and using love as a disguise to stay safe and so that they
Yep.
don't get hurt. Because going back to the scene you mentioned when after the wolf attack and Bee saves her and she's trying to clean him up and he's like yelling in her face and she's yelling back at him. I feel like a captive suffering from Stockholm syndrome would not yell back at their
Yeah.
captor, you know?
No,
But-
absolutely.
I mean, and I don't know. Maybe it is, but I like to think it's not, and maybe that's just me hoping for the best in this movie because I do really like it. Um, but yeah, no, I agree. Based on everything we talked about today, I don't think so. Anyway, I'm glad we had the discussion. Listeners, if you have a different opinion or you agree, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can drop them in the comments of wherever you find us or email us. Anyway, I think I'm so good at this, guys.
Tell us why we're wrong.
I just really like to know how like I really like knowing other people's perspectives, especially because, you know, like something we've mentioned in almost every episode of this podcast, nostalgia kind of clouds a lot of things. And so, especially if we really liked something, we're going to have a bias toward it. And so, I'd really like, I mean, I'll probably still like it, even if you tell me all the reasons why it is a Stockholm Syndrome story. And I'll be like, okay, that's fine. I'm still going to watch it and I'm still going to rep my bell, but that's fine. Anyway, I keep going back to things because like you guys say so many things and my brain's like, yeah.
Bing, bing.
What you guys were talking about with Gaston's obsession, I think it's, and then with the castle and Beast being like, oh, we have to fall in love. It's so interesting the parallel or the contrast or just the similarities in that where Gaston is like, Belle is the one because it serves me in some kind of selfish way, and Beast also and the castle also kind of has that of like, oh, she's the one because it's gonna undo all of our curses. And I don't know, there's just I can't really verbalize, which is really bad for a podcast, but I just thought in my most recent watch through that was like a really interesting similarity between the two, how they're both pursuing Belle. Well, I guess Beast wasn't necessarily pursuing at first, but how they both perceive her as like the one, you know, and just like, I just want to read books and have a good time. Please leave me alone.
Let me live my own life.
Poor Belle.
I know. But
and it goes back to like just the difference between the two options, Gaston and the Beast, where you're talking about how he's pursuing Belle to serve himself. And the Beast could have easily done that. He could have been like, you need to stay here and love me to like free me. But in the end, he learns that it's not all about him. Like, yes, it is a risk and it would have consequences, but the action of him after Belle sees that her father is in danger, of him saying, go, you're free. Like, it's him learning to truly care about someone other than himself by releasing Belle. And it shows his his character growth, his own strength, and also just why Belle is more attracted to the person who gives her freedom and options instead of the person who's like, you're gonna give me all these babies and rub my feet and you're gonna like it.
But also, I think on that same vein, Beast sees her for her. Like, even Gaston says like, oh, you're so weird, but you're beautiful, so marry me. Whereas Beast is like, I don't see, like, because I think in the live action he says something about how everyone in that village is stupid for thinking she's like weird and peculiar, right? Like, because he also has a love of knowledge and learning and education, and he's also outcasted, right? So he's like, dude, I get it. And it's weird and it sucks, but you are welcome here. Here, look at all these books you can read and I'll help you carry them. You know,
there's
you can live in this library. Yeah.
And it shows just like that connection in the Broadway version. There's a scene where they're talking about this exact thing of the similarities of feeling like they don't belong. And Belle says, in the town where I come from, the people think I'm odd. So I know how it feels to be different. And I know how lonely that can be. So it's these two people who find themselves just feeling so alone and finding that camaraderie and connection with each other by finding someone who is going to see the goodness within themselves, not just the outside, not just their beauty, but who they are as a person and who they are at heart.
I love
And I
that.
ship it.
I
ship it.
I ship it hard.
I ship it.
I love
well,
that.
Yeah. Talking about shipping them, this is like much lighter, so we're going here now. I am one of the people of the opinion that the Beast like didn't need to turn back into the prince at the end. Like he could have fully stayed the Beast and that Belle would have still like loved him. In fact, this may have just been me, but when he turns into the prince, like before she like recognizes him, she makes this face that's sort of like is this what I'm getting? I liked you better as the prince.
And how do we? Where's the enchantress to change you back?
I'm gonna say my opinion for my hot take.
Okay,
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I think Human Beast is the cutest Disney prince.
Ooh.
When he turned around with that Fabio hair and his like flouncy blouse like half open, I'm like, oh. Like little Little's like,
wait,
what is this feeling so sudden and new? So I am a staunch defender of Human Beast. I think he's hot. He has potential.
Some might say that he looks like Brendan Fraser as Tarzan.
Oh my gosh. Everything makes so much sense. Everything about my entire life makes so much sense because Human Beast was the precursor to George of the Jungle, which was the precursor to Rick O'Connell. You have solved the mystery of my life here today.
And we can end the podcast here.
I need a minute.
Just say it. Or yeah, I guess George of the Jungle. That's who it was, not Tarzan. But you know, yeah, you knew what I meant. You knew what I meant.
Although Tarzan is also peak Disney animated men.
See, you've got to type, Lindley. You've got to type.
It's either the like himbo George of the Jungle, Rick O'Connell types, or the unfortunate like hot villain. Because I'm like, yeah, the Darkling does bad stuff, but also
look at him.
He's nice to look at. We don't approve of any of his actions at all, but you know, he is nice to look at.
Oh my gosh.
So we love a hunky himbo and a hot villain. That's it.
I love it. That's so funny.
Except Gaston. We don't like, yeah.
We don't like Gaston.
Nah.
No, because he's just a sexist asshole and we don't.
Sometimes their personality just
like sometimes you can save him, sometimes it's not worth it.
Sometimes
oh my God.
It's not worth it. Oh man. I think, Heather, to your point, kind of like in Shrek when Fiona doesn't turn back into a human, that would have been kind of sweet. I haven't watched the Enchanted Christmas, and if I have, it's been a really long time, so I feel like I need to rewatch that.
It doesn't help the case of those who think Beauty and the Beast is Stockholm Syndrome.
Never mind.
Because at one point, Belle does something like the Beast told her not to do when he throws her back in a dungeon.
Oh.
But you watch it for Tim Curry and Bernadette Peters.
We do.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm also confused about that timeline, because he's a beast still, but it's Christmas.
Yeah. This was definitely just a, get that straight to DVD cash money that it was Michael Eisner loved doing. It's
anyway,
we don't take the Enchanted Christmas into that much canon because it's the music is
just messes everything up.
Yeah
anyway,
a little bit.
We will watch it. It's fine. We're just gonna toss that out. I'm trying to think of other themes that we've seen in this movie. I think we've touched on a lot of shame, a little bit of identity, kindness, love, obsession. Like Gaston gives me like Joe Goldberg vibes from You. It's like really gross.
Oh no.
Right. And like trying to get rid of her father so he could be with her.
Yeah,
my brain is like malfunctioning right now.
We're breaking you.
For personal reasons, I can't watch You, so now I'm looking back and I'm like, oh no. I
That's
just
fine.
imagine Richard White's voice just coming up and being like, "Hello, you."
Oh God.
Oh
Let's
no.
see.
Well, speaking of though, what you were saying about like, since this is a mental health podcast, a word that they throw around a lot in the movie about Belle's father is crazy. And I just think we should address that as well. Like about how everyone just consistently is calling him crazy. He's more like passionate and
Yeah.
eccentric.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a little tough to hear like that word being thrown around in such a way. And I know it wasn't like as big of a
Well,
stigma.
especially when they tried to throw him in an insane asylum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by the Crypt Keeper.
So
Literally.
He looks exactly like the Crypt Keeper, and he
Sure
scared
does.
me so much.
yeah.
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 And so I just think that that's something that needs to be addressed too on a podcast that is about mental health, is like, you shouldn't just throw that word around when someone's a little bit different. They're not crazy.
Right.
They're just figure out the right word to use.
They're just different than you, and that doesn't make them crazy.
Yeah.
And it's sad that that is a word, but when people have a hard time understanding someone or what they do or what they like, that be like, well, I don't like that, so they're crazy, or they're not acting the way that society has told me and what I've already conformed to act like, so crazy. It's hard.
Yeah, that's definitely a word I am also trying to extract from my vocabulary, because it's just become so, it's just a part of our language and our culture, is just to call things like, oh, that's so crazy, or oh, she's so crazy for doing that wild thing, but I think we gotta rein that in.
I agree.
But thank you for that note, because that is a really good point. Speaking of identity, going back again, because that's apparently what I'm doing today. I feel like identity is definitely addressed in both Beast and Gaston, in terms of, like you were saying, what Beast thinks a prince or a king should be, should look like, should act, and Gaston and how a man should be or should act. And I like, okay, I have like two thoughts to this. On one hand, I like that Belle isn't affected by the societal shoulds, and that she's very strong in who she is, even though she's labeled as like a peculiar weird girl or whatever. But I do kind of wish there was a little bit more development to her character, because I feel like she didn't change necessarily throughout the story, which again isn't a bad thing, because then maybe it is a representation on how being kind and compassionate affects the people around you. I don't know. But I do wish there were just like, I don't know, just a little pinch of something added to her character by the end that we hadn't seen before. Because throughout the entire thing, she's very kind, compassionate, and nurturing, and that doesn't really ever change. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a song in the Broadway show called "A Change in Me," but it's more about how like her feelings have changed, not necessarily like, it's a little bit about how she has changed. But I agree. I would have liked to see that that development in her a little bit more.
Yeah. So I guess we can talk about journeys now. HB, do you have any notes on how this movie or Belle can relate to a fitness journey?
I don't about fitness particularly, but I do about body image. And we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when it comes to like the shame that the Beast had. And I think that like there's several bullet points here. And one of them is that there is someone out there for everyone. As much as I like hate to speak in cliches like that, all of these are going to sound like cliches. And you know me, I'm not one for like speaking in this way, but I do really think that there, like, one lesson when it comes to body image in this is that there is someone out there for everyone. Like, if someone can fall in love with the Beast, who is like this angry monster, like, then they can fall in love with you. Like, there is someone out there for you. But I also think that it's when it comes to looks, I think one of the themes is that beauty comes from within. And I think that is a lesson that is taught at the very beginning from the witch, where it's like, I might be an ugly witch and you won't let me in, but like, you don't know anything else about me besides that I am an ugly witch, right? And you chose to turn me away for those reasons. So, and I think that theme is carried throughout the movie, just like with Belle falling in love with the Beast, and with the Beast falling in love with Belle. Even though she is beautiful, he still needed to figure out how to love her, right? And the quote that I have to sort of like tie that all together is also at the end of the curse, where it's like, or maybe not the curse, but at the end of the introduction, when the narrator says, "For who could ever love a beast?" And so I think that's just all really about, you know, like, your looks are not your worth. Again, like, we talked about this in Snow White, and I feel like I bring it up a lot, but I think that is a positive message that is sent from this movie, hopefully. And I know that I was confused about Belle being beautiful and being an outcast or whatever, but I do think that another reason that I connected to this movie was for that reason of like them falling in love, right? And you know, no, they didn't necessarily need to get married. And to go back to what you were saying earlier, LB, like, I would have been happy if the movie ended just with the curse ending and them just like everyone changing back, and it's like they fell in love, they did the thing, and now that's their happy ending. But I think just like the knowledge that like this love is capable, like you have to go past the image of a person to find love. Like, initial attraction might be what gets you there, but like what is underneath is what is going to keep you there. Like, that's where your happily ever after lies.
That's so sweet. That was really cute. That did bring up two thoughts. Like, we've talked about dating apps in this episode. I think dating apps make that kind of hard because you kind of only get the superficial stuff first, right?
Yeah, you see what others want. Like, you put out there what you want others to see. Sometimes it's not always necessarily what is true.
Yeah, it's not always authentic because it's like, oh, this is what will get me the likes or the match. I don't know how those work. I'm sorry. The matches and the super matches or whatever. But I just feel like that there's so many things that dating apps are helpful for, but also make a little bit harder and complicated. And I do think that's one of them. But I do like what you're saying, HB, about how looks aren't everything, because even though Belle is like supposed to be the most beautiful person, inside and out, I do think in the same way that she looks beyond Beast's exterior to see this like kind person buried deep underneath, he kind of does the same thing with her. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember him ever saying like, oh, she's so beautiful, and like having her looks be the thing that makes him fall in love with her, you know, or like even spark the interest. It's like her standing up for herself and talking back to him, being kind and compassionate, and like cleaning his wounds and bandaging him up, and just being kind and having a beautiful personality, I think, are the things that make him feel some kind of way toward her. Because when they're out in the snow or whatever, and he's like, I've never felt this way about anyone, I want to believe, because I don't want them married at the end, I want to believe he doesn't mean love. I think he just means like a softness other than rage and impatience that he's feeling toward her. Like, he's finally seeing an example of what kindness and tenderness looks like, especially in the live action. They talk about him having a very cruel and hard father, and his mother died when he was very young. So I think maybe in some kind of way, her being so nurturing, which we could also talk about, is like a little much to some degree, could be a little like but I think her nurturing reminds him of his mother. And it does, because I mean, like in the live action, he scratched out his face and his father's face, but he left the mother's portrait intact. So he definitely has positive feelings toward his mom. And I think maybe that's another nice layer I liked about the live action, is like another connection that he has toward her, that they have to each other. Yeah.
I have something else to add to what you said. It's like, it's tangential, but it's related. And it is that I think sometimes in these fairy tales, something that is negatively impacts women specifically is that we think that if we are kind enough and nurturing enough and open enough that we can change a man.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that is a message that is sent over and over and over again, that like if I am just this and this enough, he will fall in love with me, or he will change, and I will be able to change him into the kind, open, like and I just think that that is a bit of a negative message that we sort of take on. It's definitely one that I have taken on, where it's like I've dated people and I've given them everything and they don't give me anything in return, and in fact, in return, what I get is heartbreak, because they are not, like, what I am giving them is not, like, they're not willing to change, so I'm still giving everything and they're just absorbing it, right?
And they're not reciprocating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is like, and that is a pattern that I have come into in my relationships, is really seeing like, oh, if I just do this and this, then they will fall in love with me, because that's what I've seen is how it's supposed to go. Right. And even in relationships where there is love, you can't expect someone to change. Like, if you are in a relationship with someone, you need to be in the relationship with who they are right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the expectation of change can't be there. You can try to learn and grow together, but that has to be something that you're willing to communicate, learning and growing together. But like, if there's something fundamentally about someone that you want to change or need to change, that's not your job. And I think that growing up watching Disney, and Belle being a really good example of this, is like, she was kind and nurturing, and she changed the beast into being or helped the beast change. I don't want to say she changed him. She helped the beast recognize the ways in which he can be softer and more open to love. But that's not always how it works in the real world. And I think we just need to like put that on there too.
Yeah. I think that the key words from what you're saying are the difference between change and growth. You can't change a person, but you can grow with them. And those are very different mindsets to either enter a relationship or be in a relationship and have a significant other and stuff. And I think that's a really good point. There was something else you said. Oh, I think another message we get from society is, especially in like heterosexual relationships, the woman becomes a mother-ish like figure, and it's actually kind of gross that like the expectation is for, once the person leaves their mother's home and wings or whatever, that the person they end up with is supposed to cook and clean, and the man doesn't learn any of those things. And I feel like now, because our generation is starting to have kids and they're teaching them like, no, you are also going to contribute, because this is your household and she is your partner, not your mother. But I do think, especially in this time of the movies that we're talking about as of recently, that was definitely a message of like, you don't need to learn how to do housekeeping and chores and taking care of yourself, because you have your mother to do that. And then when you get married, your wife is going to do that, and it's just like, and I really like that that's not a message as strong of a message anymore. I do think that there are some cases in which, but it's starting to fizzle out, and I'm like, yes, thank God, because no, it's gross. And I like how they kind of target that head on with Belle and Gaston, and him being like, you're gonna cook and clean and make babies and have babies for me, and she's like, absolutely not, no thank you.
I'm gonna have magical, talking kitchen aids.
Absolutely,
that will do that for me. Thanks, bye.
Yes,
thanks, bye. I have a whole cupboard of little cups that I can adopt. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and then touch on some healing journey stuff before we get into our favorite characters and themes and quotes and yay. There's this quote, I think it's like a Russian proverb. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is what happens when I consume too much social media content. But there's a quote that says, the same boiling water that softens a potato will harden the egg. And I think it's just a good, it's a good quote to talk about how we all come out of trials and hardships differently. I think Gaston and the Beast are definitely the egg, and Belle seems to be the potato.
He's the best potato.
The best potato. But and I think this movie too, especially in the relationship with Belle and Beast, it's never too late to choose differently or to change. Like, just because you came out of this thing a potato or an egg or just because you came out of this thing as an egg doesn't mean you can't be a potato.
I
Anyway,
have a series of cosplay videos in my Belle in my Belle outfits where I just go in like, I'm a potato.
Yeah. So
I
perfect.
relate to this so much.
amazing. I'm so glad you're understanding what I'm saying, because I don't know if everyone's going to, but I hope so. I hope the people who needed to hear it will, and they understand. And I don't need to go any further into that. So, all of that to say, my encouragement, especially when we're talking about post-traumatic growth, and this is like a relatively new concept being researched. I think it like came out in the 90s, which I guess to some people might not be very recent, but that's okay. I first learned about it when I was taking my like coaching certification course, and I'll get into that in a second, but I just want to, I guess, like prelude disclaimer that like we're going to be talking about post-traumatic growth now. So my encouragement would be, to not let those hardships turn you cruel. And that's not to say like, oh, you have to be positive. Like we're not about toxic positivity here. Talked about that a lot. But I think it's maybe to find a silver lining in the both, and like, yes, this very hard, hurtful thing happened to me and it hurt. And I also choose to have it shape me for the better. And you don't have to turn everything into a positive. I'll just throw it out there too. Like sometimes things just suck, and they can just suck. And that's kind of the period of life I'm in right now, where everything just kind of sucks, and that's okay.
Mood.
Yeah.
Yes.
The rain brings the rainbow. Anyway, I think, as long as you're happy with the life you're living and you are doing what's within your power to make it a life you love and be a person you respect, I think that's all that really matters. So post-traumatic growth, like I said, is a theory that was developed in the 1990s. And it it says that people who face adversity can often find positive growth afterwards, and I think that can be really encouraging. I think it depends on where in your journey you are for that to feel okay and acceptable, because I think depending on where you are, it can look a little too toxic positivity-ish. But I will say, according to the research done, they have found like 5 different phases of growth. And that includes new possibilities, or like the hope that new possibilities can happen, relating to others on a different or deeper level, finding personal strength, spiritual change even, and then like a deeper appreciation for life. And when I was going through my coaching certification, they also had a little like important reminders, and so I would like to offer them to you listeners now. So the first one is that trauma is magnetic, and it takes hard work every day to not be consumed by it. So if you are on a healing journey or any kind of personal development, self-healing journey, mental health journey, whatever it may be, and you're tired, it makes sense. And that doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're not doing things right. It doesn't mean you're not trying hard enough. It just means that it is like an everyday, every minute thing that we have to be conscious of, especially if we have activations and triggers and reactions like beast and rage, and anger. It takes a lot of conscious effort to change the subconscious. So if you're tired, it's okay. You make sense. And you got this. Keep going. And also realize that it takes time for the brain and body to recover after being flooded with stress hormones. I think they're saying it takes up to 26 hours or more. So if you have a very stressful situation day and you're flooded with the cortisol and the adrenaline and all of those stress hormones, it takes 26 hours or more to kind of recover from that. That's more than a day.
Yeah.
So like if something happens and you're winded the next day and you're like, God, why am I so tired? Why am I not? I had like all these plans and now I can't do it, and I just want to lay in bed all day. You also make sense. Some other like reminders or encouragements would be discover what brings you back into the present moment and anchors you in the here and now. This is something I feel like I talk a lot about in almost every episode, that sometimes when things happen in the present, we view them from a lens in the past, and that cannot always be helpful. I will say that it's your brain trying to help, because it's like, oh, this situation feels like something I remember from way back here, and this is how you responded to get through it. And sometimes it doesn't always match up. So just be mindful of that. The more grounded and present you are helps with clear thinking and emotional regulation. Again, that's just about being in the here and now. When you manage your activation levels or arousal levels, whatever word you like to use, you can feel more in control. I think that's something we see with Beast. Well, he's also being encouraged by his little furniture friends of them being like, you need to control your temper. And he's like, but she's being difficult. But he's trying. So I think that's a fun little representation or a moment that I was like, oh, that's him trying to calm down. Anyway, when things become too disturbing, use your prepared and practice list of available grounding and centering tools. And I think the key word there is like prepared and practice. I think I mentioned this in another episode that like when you're dealing with triggers and activations, trying to work through them is like trying to learn how to swim in the middle of a hurricane. It can be, I don't want to say it is, but it can be easier when we are doing breath work or grounding practices, when we are regulated, to kind of like lock it in the subconscious so that when we are going through those moments of like, oh shit, I'm feeling triggered. What do I do? It's much easier to go into like, okay, let me take a breath, let me ground, versus like, oh, my usual response is flight and I'm gonna run away. Anyway, create and call upon your safe people who positively support you. I think this is what I really like about their relationship. There are some issues, but I do like that we see healing on Beast's part in relation with Belle. It's not so much that she heals him, but she helps him heal, kind of like what you were saying, HB. Like, she doesn't change him, but she helps him grow by being kind and compassionate and her authentic self. Oh, and then going back to the prepared and practice list, the reason why is because when you're activated, your prefrontal cortex goes offline. That was a little note I made and I forgot to mention it, so I'm gonna tack that on after. Practice some self-compassion and self-regulation / soothing. I feel like while we don't necessarily see this with Beast, I feel like if they had made a sequel, like I think Belle would have taught him some good self-regulation and grounding techniques, and also like would have taught him about self-compassion. I don't know if there were any self-help books in his little library, well, his big library, but I think
I was about to say that ain't a little library. That's a big library.
That is
the
library.
Every bookish nerd's dream.
Every dream. Oh my gosh. And then the last thing is just focus on what you want and the ways you can keep moving toward your own wellness. And I like the wording here of the ways you can keep moving, not the ways you think you should, or what's beyond your capacity and capability and outside of your comfort zone and your window of tolerance, but what feels safe and doable right now. And that's it. That's it, as I went on like a 10-minute spiel. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that was a good spiel though.
Yeah, I think sometimes people do need tangible things, and like these are all very tangible things that you can do if you are experiencing something like this, you know?
Yeah. I think
absolutely,
because there isn't a blueprint on the healing journey. There are no like step-by-step lists and guides. I think just having a few of these things as like a framework for your own journey can be helpful, just like to keep you accountable, keep you on track, keep you focused on why you're doing what you're doing. Anyway. Lindley, yes. What is your favorite quote from the movie?
Oh, it's gonna be so silly. The one that just immediately comes to my head is, if it's not Baroque, fix it. Because I am a sucker for a good aesthetic, and I understand where Cogsworth is coming from.
He is very funny. I like him a lot.
I love Cogsworth. I'm trying to think of like any, just basically all of the Belle reprise is just all my favorite quote. But for some reason, the Baroque gets me every single time.
Baroque. It is very funny. Baroque, fix it. Who's your favorite character?
I mean, the easiest answer is Belle, just because she's been such an important character to me throughout the years. But besides Belle, I have to go with Mrs. Potts.
Oh, I
adore Mrs. Potts. She's so lovely. She's so caring and nurturing. And she's Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
You can't get better than that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good
What
point.
what about y'all? What's favorite characters and quotes?
Mine is also probably Mrs. Potts if we had to go outside of Belle. And one of my favorite quotes is really dumb, also a very silly one. But it is when Gaston says, "I've been thinking," and then, or no, does Gaston say, "I've been thinking," and someone says, "A dangerous
pastime." I
Bo
know.
says that. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
It's the beginning of his song, right? Like
Yeah.
That's a daily quote for me, my friend. Like, she'd be like, "I've been thinking, dangerous pastime." I know.
I know. Yeah. I just thought that was funny. It was one that I hadn't like picked up on before. I was like, oh, that's yeah. I'm a sucker for a good villain song, so no surprise that that's one of my favorite quotes.
It's what Alan Menken does best.
Truly.
Like, oh,
Truly.
okay.
Side note, so I don't know if you've seen the live action Little Mermaid yet, Lindley. I don't want to.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's
Perfect.
so good.
Oh my God. So
Hallie
good.
is the
and
perfect Ariel.
chef's kiss. Like I literally could not picture anyone else. So
No.
amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
They changed some of the lyrics. And they're very subtle changes, and I really like them. And I'm wondering, because I don't know off the top of my head, if they did the same thing for the animated to live action, other than adding songs, adding really good songs like Evermore. Oh, love it.
Oh my gosh, I will defend Evermore. I know a lot of people are upset that they didn't pull in If I Can't Love Her from the Broadway version, which I'm a little sad that a lot of the Broadway versions of these properties and shows aren't making their way into the live action. In the live action, in the background, you do hear the orchestral of Home, which is a beautiful song that Belle has in the stage version about her feelings about being imprisoned here. If you haven't listened to Home from the Beauty and the Beast, go listen to it. I don't know. I feel like
Maybe.
there are some changes.
I'll have to look it up, and then I'll look it up, and then we can talk about it in our bonus episode on Patreon, where we break down the music from these movies.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Madame Lagarderobe, unsung hero of this movie. Also, shout out to Audra McDonald, who played her in the movie, and the movie was all better for it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I forgot about that when I was watching the live action this morning. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I too, my favorite character in the animated is probably Belle. I mean, how can you not? She's probably like the best character in that one, other than Mrs. Potts, because who doesn't want just a kind, nurturing mama to pour you tea?
Everybody.
I don't actually have a quote. Not that this movie isn't quotable, but I feel like this is the first time where I'm like, I don't know, I kind of liked all of it. I don't feel like there was necessarily a quote that really stood out to me. There are a lot of funny ones. So like in the live action, LeFou might actually be my favorite character because he's just so like funny and sassy. And I like the pivot that they made with his character where he starts to question Gaston.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, maybe this isn't okay. But I do like in the beginning when Gaston is trying to pursue Belle and Gaston says something like, or no, sorry, LeFou says something like, well, she's so well read and you're more athletically inclined. He's so nice about it, but he's like, even from the beginning, he's like, maybe not. Whereas in the animated, I feel like LeFou is like, yeah, you're my buddy, and any woman who doesn't want you is he's just doing like the typical friend hype up thing. But I think my favorite quote in the live action from LeFou is when Gaston says, she hasn't made a fool of herself to gain my favor. What would you call that? And LeFou goes, dignity.
No, LeFou is like
really
a
funny.
great friend. Like, get your friend like LeFou. Like, even if like the whole song Gaston is because LeFou is like trying to pump him up and be like,
yeah, it's a
don't
hype
be
song.
sad, buddy. You can do anything.
Look at how amazing you are. Anytime, you know what, that's gonna be my new goal. Anytime my friends are feeling down, I'm gonna sing about how amazing they are.
No one, and then just make up things that are like about them.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
I love it.
I love it.
Let's get Josh Gad on the phone. Be like, hey, can you help me hype up my friend?
You
Is he
sing
on
the new song?
Cameo? Like, hey.
That would be amazing if he
That
was.
would be really funny.
Before we wrap up, does anyone have any more hot takes that we like? I know we've talked about a couple. We
Ooh.
talked Stockholm syndrome, and apparently we talked the hot take that this is this that the prince is Lindley's is the hottest
He
Disney
was
prince.
hot. Not
But
gonna
are
If
there
they
any
had
other...
made a live action in the 90s, I bet Brendan Fraser would have been the prince.
So he was supposed to be a prince in another movie.
Really?
I just recently found this out, and it's my favorite piece of trivia. So there was a little musical called Into the Woods, and it
Sure.
got made into a movie in like
Yes.
2010. I forgot when it was.
Mhm.
They were supposed to make a movie of. They've been trying to get Into the Woods movie made for a long time, and apparently there was a time where Brendan Fraser was being considered for Rapunzel's prince. Can you imagine him singing Agony? It's my just picturing it is my favorite thing.
That would have been
Wow.
so amazing.
Wow.
It completely blew my mind.
Ugh.
My one hot take, and I feel like it's not that much of a hot take, but this is coming from a costuming nerd.
Sure.
The live action movie. Y'all. Belle's yellow dress. It's not great.
Like the
And
tulle sleeves.
that and like I like the different layers of it, but it's just something is not there. And I think it's because we're given all of these amazing like garb de la robes and just these like 18th century costumes from like Madame la Garde-Robe and from the ball scene. Why couldn't Belle have been in a gown like that?
That is a good
To
point.
make it
does
more
just kind of look like a costume, like when Haley Steinfeld
Yes.
was at the Oscars or something, and she's like,
The
"I'll sing with
MTV Movie
you."
Awards.
Oh, the
Yes.
MTV Music Awards, and she's just wearing a yellow dress, and I'm like, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been better. And I know there was a whole thing about how Emma Watson refused to wear like corsetry
Yeah.
in which I it's a whole rant on corsetry, but at the time they wouldn't have been wearing corsets, they would have been stays, and stays at the time wouldn't have been tight laced. So basically she was just like, I'm not gonna wear it because the patriarchy would be like, that's not what stays were about. They were just bras. So seeing the dress and be like, that could have used a little more structure. And you know what would have helped with structure? Stays. Some stays.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, so my hot take is just like, it could have been better. We could have had a better dress.
Fair. My hot
All right.
take from the live action is they're in France. Why do they have British accents? Like everyone in the castle, well, Lumiere specifically has, and the feather plumette, they have French accents,
but nobody else.
but Emma, yeah,
it's the Phantom of the Opera thing where the only person in the whole movie with a French accent is Madame Giry. Everybody else is either American or British. There's no consistency whatsoever.
I did, because then I was like, oh, well, I know that like Belle and her father are from a different place and they've like moved into this village, but they're from Paris.
This is the Paris of my childhood where we all talk like British people.
There you go. Yeah. My hot take is that like halfway through the movie, I was like, Gaston isn't like, he sucks and he's an asshole, but he's like not a villain. And then once we got to the point where it was like, oh, he's gonna put her dad in an insane asylum and then also murder the beast just for existing. I was like, okay, I see it now. However, I think my hot take is the same as every hot take I've ever had about all the villains who have died, is that I don't think he needed to die.
Yeah, he also could have grown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he needed to fall to his death. And I think that about pretty much every time we've talked about this. It's like the villains, a lot of the villains have died. And it's like, I'd rather just like see them be punished for being bad and then see them make a change or something.
Like
But
Hans.
I did
like
hear,
Hans.
yeah, exactly. But like I did hear that there is a fiction novel called G. I think it's called G. It might be called something else. I'll have to look it up. But it is written from the perspective of if Gaston fell to his death, or fell but didn't die, and then like floated up a river and wound up somewhere else, like in a different village, and lived his life there. There's like a I don't know anything else about it. I saw it on TikTok and I'm pretty sure it's just called G, but it's like Gaston's story after the story.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
There are some very interesting like Beauty and the Beast like fictions out there, especially ones that are like licensed by Disney. There's one that's called, I think, The Beast Within, where Gaston and the prince were friends before the enchantment. And then there is another one that I haven't finished called Rebel Rose, where it takes place after Beauty and the Beast, or after the events of the movie, but it's set in like real life France at the time. So the French Revolution is about to happen.
Oh.
So it's a little, I haven't finished it yet, but it's like, oh no.
Wow.
This is not good.
Yeah, that is interesting.
That is interesting. Because I know there's like Disney has their own series of books that are kind of like what if. Like I have the Mulan one that's like, what if Mulan didn't save Shang or something. There was and then like Ariel, and there's I want the Meg one that's like, what if Meg didn't save Hercules or something?
Ooh.
Or what if he did become a god? And then it's like Meg's journey in trying to become a goddess herself to join him on Olympus. Or something like that. Anyway, yeah, that's interesting. I do think it's interesting, kind of like with Cinderella, we get a lot of like different iterations and stories that have the framework of Beauty and the Beast. And I think the main message and story is that like beauty comes from within, just like you were saying, HB.
Yeah.
I think my only note that we didn't really touch on is, how do I say this? Belle's weakness. We've talked a lot about how much we like her and some good things, but I do think her weakness is taking care of everyone, especially with like her father and then Beast, because it kind of seems like after her mother, they never really address it in the animated home. We don't really know what happens to her mom.
No, I know there's like a portrait of her mother at Disney World, but they never really say like what happened to her.
Interesting. I think it's interesting that she kind of adopts the role of a caretaker, and I also kind of wonder if that's the reason why she's not necessarily attracted to Gaston, is that other than the fact that he's a complete sexist asshole, he seems a little bit more self-sufficient and he doesn't actually need anyone to take care of him, whereas like her father kind of needed taking care of, and so did Beast in some kind of way, and I think there was a little bit of her kind and nurturing self that may have leaned into this like parentified childish role. Like, I don't know, I think that's kind of
I don't know if I agree with that, because I feel like Gaston wants to be taken care of even though he can, and she's like pushing that away of like, I don't want to stay home and make babies and take care of you and do all of those things. Like,
yeah,
that's fair.
Like she talks about like wanting to go out and like experience a life other than what is expected of her.
Yeah,
this is true. True.
Plague.
This is why Plague.
In the live action version, you do see where her mother had the plague, and that is why they left Paris, because her mom had the plague, so Belle wouldn't get the plague.
Wow.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I love that. Good.
Plague.
Other than that, nope. I don't have any other notes, thoughts, or feelings.
I'm good too.
It's a good old fairy
Yay.
tale about loving yourself and being kind to others.
Yeah, and accepting love from other people.
Yes.
As much as you should love, but you must also be loved. Anyway. Okay.
Even if you think you don't deserve it,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
because you
Yeah.
do.
You do. Well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode. You can find us on Instagram. We have a TikTok now. I don't know if we've ever mentioned that. We have TikTok. You can follow us on TikTok. You can email us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on our first
Yay.
episode back from summer break.
Thanks,
Yay.
Lindley.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebin_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.